America's not going to sit back and do nothing. And now they are striking back, challenging China for the future of the world. And what we have is an incumbent power trying to regain ground ceded to China over the past decade, especially during the last 2 years. America has made strategic mistakes such as the oil price caps and weaponizing the dollar. And because of this, they have lost ground. And let's understand the multiple losses the US has endured over the past 12 months. We have OPEC working together to squeeze the oil markets. BRICS is expanding with 6 new members, including Saudi Arabia and the UAE. Plus, the recent Saudi-Iran peace deals signals China's growing footprint in the Middle East, and that is the backyard of the United States. America is now moving and launching an economic counteroffensive, and this is their plan to wrestle back hegemony, and we must take this seriously. In our lead story today, G20 Summit transport project to link India to the Middle East and Europe unveiled. Just from this picture, we can see what President Biden is trying to do. He's trying to build further influence in India and salvage the Saudi Arabia situation. And make no mistake, this is the direct challenge to China's Belt Road Initiative, the BRI. America is trying to counter China's incredible rise in the developing world, and the corridor is going to include India, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Jordan, Israel, and the EU. And this is basically a plan to connect the Middle East and India closer with the Western world to boost trade. And remember, guys, whoever controls the flow of trade controls the world. If China controls the majority of trade, if money flows through the BRI, they can influence how the trade is done. And this obviously means getting deals done outside of US dollars and using more of the Chinese yuan. China is trying to de-dollarize the world and weaken the Western financial system. And America's agenda is the direct opposite. They want to keep the world dollarized, and to accomplish that, they need to be in the center of all the trade flows. This is the flip side of China's absence in the G20 summit. While China's absence causes cracks in the G20's relevance and places more importance on BRICS, there is a downside. It has given America an opportunity to push their agenda ahead more easily, right? There are really pros and cons to everything. And in this video, we have to talk about America's move to counter China and how big of a threat it can be. You can never underestimate anyone in this Game of Thrones. And what America is trying to build are essentially economic corridors. And these are basically infrastructure like roads, railways, and ports, things that countries need to stimulate their economic development. It's exactly what China has been doing with their BRI for over a decade since 2013. Beijing has been going around the world from Africa to the Middle East to build up infrastructure to boost their economy. And now America is seeing the value in copying China's playbook. But pay attention to this phrase from Biden's investment speech at the G20, contributing to a more stable, more prosperous, and integrated Middle East. Bingo! America finally realizes how important Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states are to retaining hegemony. And that's why we are seeing this 180 shift with Biden shaking the hands of MBS. It is not a coincidence. And here's what Jake Sullivan, head of the NSA, has to say. Enhanced infrastructure would boost economic growth, help bring countries in the Middle East together, and establish that region as a hub for economic activity. We are seeing a big scramble by Biden and friends to win over the Saudis, the UAE, and the rest of the oil producers. It's all about influencing the oil producing nations and, of course, ensuring trade is still done in the dollar. Now, defending the reserve currency is just one battlefield, right? The West is also moving to wrestle trade dominance away from China. And this is important. The US might be the world's biggest consumer, but China is the world's greatest exporter. And this is where their economic power comes from. They are the world's factory. When we compare countries by their total exports, China ranks number 1 with $3.7 trillion worth. The United States comes in at number 2 and Germany at number 3. Sure, it looks like Europe is exporting a lot, but wait till the 2023 figures comes in. The UK and German industries are getting hammered, so their export numbers will likely take a big drop as well. And that's why the corridor is important to the West. They can't replace China's manufacturing advantage that has been established over the last 30 years, right? It's not just cheap labor, guys, but an entire network of industries that allows China to stay on top to be very competitive. And that's why the EU's president, von der Leyen, is jumping up and down for the economic corridor. She knows it is necessary if they want their industries and trade to survive. Europe's manufacturing is getting hammered by higher energy inputs, right? So they are banking on this trade route to close the gap and make their exports more competitive. According to estimates, the corridor could speed up trade between India and Europe by 40%. And this is key. If you can reduce shipping time by 40%, you would obviously save on costs. And this statement also reveals a lot. It is not only to sell stuff into the Indian market, the West has earmarked India to be their new manufacturing base, their friend-shoring hub. And there's a reason why Janet Yellen was dispatched to India so many times, right? She has been making multiple trips there, including heading to the G20 to talk to India for the third time. India is integral to America's friend-shoring plans, and that means relying less and less on China to manufacture stuff and doing it in countries they seem friendlier. And this entire plan is America's grand strategy to isolate China's economy. After the G20 summit, President Biden traveled to Vietnam to build their supply chains there. In a report by Reuters, this was done to secure deals on semiconductors and minerals. Biden essentially wants Vietnam to be another manufacturing base to counter China. And back in 2022, Kurt Campbell, America's Indo-Pacific point man, believed India and Vietnam would be the future of Asia, and in particular, Vietnam is a swing state in the region. It's so painfully obvious what Biden is trying to do, and it's quite hilarious when he keeps saying it isn't about containing China. It absolutely is when you are trying to decouple your manufacturing from Beijing. So America is starting to make big moves in China's backyard, and this economic counteroffensive is all about weakening China's manufacturing base while also defending the dollar. But let's analyze how much of a credible threat this economic corridor is. Can America even pull it off? Because they are not coming from a position of strength, the West is playing a game of catch up. Firstly, there aren't any concrete details about this trade corridor. It's simply a memorandum of understanding, a MOU at this point. It is not a contract, so it isn't binding. And so far, 7 countries have signed onto this MOU: Saudi Arabia, the EU, India, the UAE, France, Germany, Italy, and of course the United States. The desire to counter China is there, but how feasible is it? To challenge the BRI, you need to pour a ton of money into the project. It definitely won't be cheap. Over 140 countries have signed on for the BRI, and China's footprint across the world is extremely massive. Looking at the world map, a huge part of the global south and the Middle East has already signed on with China's plan. And the BRI spans not just Asia, but the Middle East as well. It extends across Africa all the way to South America. So there is a global footprint here. The China-Pakistan Economic Corridor alone is estimated at $62 billion. Experts have also predicted that China's total expenses over the life of the BRI could hit as much as $8 trillion. And that is a ton of money that Beijing has invested over the decades. And this brings into question America's and Europe's commitment to countering China. How much money can they cough out? Because you best believe a ton of this financing is going to come from debt. The US Treasury is going to sell a ton of bonds to raise the money. And this is going as a line item in the deficit spending shopping list. And because of higher bond yields and endless borrowing, America's debt payments are going up. The Congressional Budget Office has issued a scary projection for the national debt. According to the CBO, the net interest on debt is increasing fast. Because of higher interest rates and crazy deficit spending, the interest payments will exceed 20% of federal revenues by 2034. And this means for every $100 the US government brings in, $20 will be used to service the debt. And that is an insane burden that can't continue forever. And this is going to limit how much money America can pour into the economic corridor. Because the majority of money will come from the United States. Europe is now in recession and their economies is in shambles. So the heavy lifting will be from the US. And we are heading towards a multipolar world where the Western Bloc is moving against the East, specifically Russia and China. And the biggest evidence of this is Italy's planned withdrawal from China's BRI. And during the G20 summit, Meloni told China's premier that Italy is about to exit from the BRI. They are pivoting back to the United States in a clear sign that the G7 are now banding together. Obviously, this isn't good for China, but it isn't good for Italy either. While it's true that China has been exporting more to Italy than the other way around, China has also been investing a lot into the country. A think tank found that between 2014 and 2020, China invested in 24 projects in Italy, and those investments were worth over $22 billion in total. And that is a large sum of money. So we can expect future investments to really dry up. But at the same time, Italy doesn't want to stop trading with China. They want to keep trading with China while pulling out of the BRI at the same time. And I think this is going to be the future. There will be the Western Bloc building their own trading routes. The Eastern Bloc with their BRI and investments will flow only amongst themselves, right? And the only interaction left between them will be global trade. Both the United States and China are investing less and less with each other as well. At the peak, which was sometime around 2016 to 18, the US invested over $30 billion in China, and China in turn invested over $50 billion into America. But that trend is reversing. The world is effectively splitting apart. And China, of course, isn't sitting back doing nothing either. They are pushing forward with their BRI plans. In a report by Reuters, China says 90 countries have confirmed attendance for the Belt Road Initiative Forum, and that is just part of the 150 countries that have signed on. And according to China, the past 10 years have seen 3,000 projects worth nearly $1 trillion of investments. And if America and the G7 wants to play catch up with China, they must be prepared to invest far more than $1 trillion. But the stakes here are huge, and this economic war is going global. Both sides are trying to win support, especially from the Middle East. And I have to mention this again because it's supremely important. America is trying to bring back India, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE back to the established system. And if that happens, the dollar system, the hegemony of the US dollar, will persist for longer, and it will be another roadblock for China. But if we reverse things, the result is equally dire if America loses. Not only will they dig themselves deeper into debt, it will result in even faster de-dollarization, and JP Morgan just revealed why. The biggest risk of de-dollarization isn't really a rival currency. It is the United States losing a key tool to fight their economic crisis. And here's what they mean. The power of the US dollar is highly dependent on trade with the global south. Because of trade with countries like China, America could import deflation, outsource parts of their economy, and enjoy the recycling of dollars back into US treasuries. And this allows the US to fight through any economic crisis by raising interest rates or printing money. It hurts the rest of the world more than the US. So, on a relative basis, America comes out ahead, right? If everyone is lying flat on the floor, the person on their knees is technically the winner. But if China's BRI wins, then they will obviously de-dollarize their trade further, and the US will lose a powerful financial tool. Deficit spending will be harder, and the US economy will find it harder to survive an economic storm. So what we are seeing is a global game of chess. China is currently many steps ahead, but I'm sure America has more tricks up their sleeves. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Will America succeed with this economic corridor, or is China too far ahead to catch up with? Let me know in the comments below. Stay safe, be sure to smash the like button and subscribe as we navigate through these crazy times.